Good afternoon, everyone. Today's November 5th. This is the Salina City Commission. Welcome to our meeting. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel. Here. Commissioner Crawford. Here. Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley. Here.
Would those that are able please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We start our meeting today with the Citizens Forum. This is a time when citizens can come forward with anything on their mind and address the commission. These items that are on today's agenda will be given public comment then. So anything that you would like to come forward on, please make sure that it's not a part of today's agenda. And when you come forward, just state your name and address for the record. Ma'am?
My name is Sandra Hernandez. I live at 1940 Starlight Drive. I'm here to speak on the ongoing process to rezone many areas in the city to the newly public use district. And I'd like to bring a stronger awareness to the City Commission of an ongoing flawed process of rezoning 14 school district properties to the public use educational facilities. Previously, it was in the quasi-judicial process. As of October 2nd, it moved to a legislative process for a corrective text amendment, and that's why I'm taking the opportunity right now to bring this before the Commission, and I appreciate your time. One of the things that I want to bring before you was the passing of an amendment to Article 10 of Chapter 42. Scroll it for me. Thank you. Yes, stay here. One specific error never corrected was the passing of Ordinance 12-10640, amending Chapter 42, Article 10, Division 2 of the Salina Code pertaining to sign regulations. After passing through the Planning Commission 2 times, it went through it. The first time, there was not a quorum, and the second time, it was a vote of 5 members, one of which had a direct conflict of interest. It was then sent on to the Commission, where it was passed on June 11th. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is one specific incidence of error that needs to be recognized, because this has been passed when in fact it should not have been passed due to the bylaws of the City of Salina in the definition of what a conflict of interest is. There is a member on the Planning Commission that owns a sign company that sells electronic signs, and the amendment was specifically for the selling, not the selling, excuse me, of adding electronic signs. One of the 5 votes that passed this amendment, or this ordinance, was that specific individual. Go ahead. The Planning Department has continued to rush the rezoning process, making repeated errors, some scrivener, some oversights, some were legal, some described in their words as transpositional errors, codification errors, or typographical errors. I'm requesting that the City Commission investigate these procedural errors and slow this rezoning process down so it can be done correctly. And I'm not sure how I can discuss it further with you, only during the time that it is in the investigative process, or no longer in judicial, is the only time I can speak to the Commission. So that's why I decided to come here today. So if I could speak to you on this further, I would be more than happy to and make myself available. I'd like to thank the commission for their time and for hearing me on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a thought, Greg, on that, and I know where she's coming from, and thank you for looking into this. Of course, we want government to work as well as it should work, and we want it to be legal and fair. And one thing I would mention is that a lot of times on these rezoning, we get exactly the opposite complaint from the people doing the rezoning, is that we take too long and we're dragging things out. And while I understand we need to do our due diligence when we do these things, understand that part of our push is for the planning department to make things up a little faster, and I'm sure we're doing everything we can to keep it up and up. But the one question I would have maybe for Greg, on the planning commission who owns the sign company, is it really considered a conflict of interest in that regard? And this is a genuine question. If he owns a sign company, but they're not specifically voting on anything that he would directly profit from, I mean...
The situation presented would not be what is referred to as the statutory substantial interest that is the basis for a legal conflict of interest that would affect one's ability to participate in the vote. Albeit, even if there is a substantial interest, the means of addressing that is by disclosure. It does not disqualify one from participating. It's one of those where one could abstain, I suppose, if that was their preference, but it is one that is generally handled by disclosure.
Then do we know offhand if that disclosure was made, or, I mean, we're probably making assumptions?
Well, and I'm sorry, I should be more clear that when there is a substantial interest, disclosure is the means of addressing that in response to your specific question.
Sure.
As to this situation, we are not in that area where there was a direct financial interest, or we weren't dealing with a matter pertaining to a contract or that sort of thing. So we're in that area where certainly awareness and disclosure is helpful. It sounds as though that's known.
Right. My thoughts are, you know, in a smaller town like we find ourselves living in, I think sometimes it's difficult to find people to fill these positions, and sometimes as a matter of course, people may be on these boards who have maybe a related but not profitable or substantial interest in the items being discussed, and whether it might seem some thoughts of impropriety or may seem like it's for a profitable reason. It may just be that, you know, it's merely an appearance only and not a direct effort on the part of the guy when he was, you know, taking a look at the signs, and I don't think he was maybe in the back of his head thinking, hey, I'm going to make money on this. So I mean, you got to keep that in mind. If we were in a city where of 100,000 people, we had plenty to choose from for our boards, it might be easier, but I think we run into this with the architects sometime on the Heritage Commission and some of the other things, as we have a limited, sometimes it's hard to fill those spots with people, so sometimes there's a perceived conflict of interest when there's really not, I guess is what I'm speaking longly about. A short answer is what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I was just taking this from strictly the bylaws of the city of Salina, which says a conflict of interest, within conflict of interest under Article 3, Section 4, a member of the Planning Commission shall not participate in any proceeding or action when the member of his or her employer, when the member or his or her employer, business partner, associate, or any person related to him or her has a recognizable financial interest in the outcome of the proceeding or action. The amendments that have been done to the signage are specific for electronic signs. The school district, in the meetings that I've attended, have not only had discussion about the electronic signs, in which I'm not saying that this individual discussing the signage is in any way incorrect. I'm saying him taking a position to vote on it is incorrect. And this is by the bylaws. It doesn't say whether it's perceived or not, it says related. If there's anything that's related, that the members shall not. In addition, I believe that everyone in the commission, the planning commission, was aware that he sold sign companies, and not one of them brought up a possible conflict of interest. It was never discussed. But if you were to go back in the minutes of the planning commissions, you would see that he, I don't know if you want to call it announced, or he mentioned, he outwardly spoke that he owns sign companies, and that he has great knowledge of it. And in doing my own research, I found that he has even sold signs to school districts or to schools. So I believe that this is more than just a perception.
But,
And I think, I don't want to cut off.
no, it's
But
right.
I really wouldn't want the two of you to engage in a debate at this time that
Yeah.
wouldn't have a fruitful end, but I would want to direct staff or ask staff. There were, I don't want to call them allegations, but there were statements made of unlawful acts and wrongful acts and errors and omissions, which can be challengeable things, and then we rely on, as a commission, on the advice of our attorney in those situations. So I would request that staff look into these for the sole reason that if we need advisement of a breach in policy or whether anything's done, we would need that advice. So I would want to thank you for bringing those things out, but I'd also want for that to be looked into, but I'm not calling for an investigation and a grinding to the halt of the process, but to take those things seriously. And maybe they've already been lodged a long time ago, and there is, but...
Commissioners, just real quick, I can hit a little bit of this. I don't want to extend the discussion much longer, but because when you're talking about things, I believe you're referring to many of the comments and assertions that were made, not just necessarily the potential conflict with signs. Early, with the first stage, after the zone was approved, and the first attempt at the process to rezone the school district properties to conform with the new zone had started, the Hernandezes brought to me certain complaints. There were multiple complaints, actually, procedural complaints, posting of signs, and some other things. Not only did we slow down the process, I had staff go and completely stop it because I felt that procedurally we needed to start over and start clean again. So we slowed it down. We stopped it because we said there are too many just mistakes, administrative mistakes. So we actually did stop it. We started it again. And one of the differences is the first time the properties were all kind of grouped together. The second time we said let's make each one an individual request because it's easier to keep track of issues with each surrounding neighborhood and so forth. So we made a change there as well to make sure that we were going at the speed that the statute would ask us to go and our code would ask us to go with addressing each site independently, trying to eliminate any potential for any of those mistakes. The mistake that was found subsequent to that was that in the zone that was approved, there was a transposition type error with some of the accessory type uses. And so that was when we brought back to you the timeout, let's get that fixed and then let's start that over. That's the only issue that's outstanding today that we're aware of. And we did talk about the sign issue to a degree, and Greg had looked at that, and that was brought to our attention from the very, very beginning. And I think part of it is you have to look at it, simply owning a sign company, is that enough? To our knowledge, there's, he didn't say, well, I have a contract for this, I have a contract for that, and typically the contractual relationship to do the work or to get paid for the work is what gets you into a conflict. And that's up as far into conflict as I can speak. It really is in Greg's territory to talk about that. But I believe we have a good process set forth to make this happen in the time frame that state law and our code would provide for.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Have anybody else from the public that would like to bring an issue to the commission? Your name and address, sir?
My name is Christopher Hernandez. I live at 1503 Stapler Avenue. Sorry. Address, okay. Basically, I'm speaking to, Article 11 in terms of the resurfacing. And I know that that you guys approved in the same particular hearing, April 17th, there's actually a typo on that. But April 16th, that you guys approved the surfacing request. It was first passed, first hearing, by emergency recommended by Mr. Gage, that you also do the second hearing at the same time, and that was based on the information that you were provided. I do feel that sometimes, as I've been reading, and as you guys already are aware, that as becoming an informed citizen, I've made some mistakes, and I hope you all received the apology letter because I wasn't allowed to contact you. I had to do it by email. That while looking at the surfacing, certain things were brought to your attention and other things were not. And specifically to 2006, there was a comprehensive study done to do the resurfacing, and that was actually the removal of certain text. It was looked over by Mr. Gage, it was looked over by that particular city commission, and they chose, based on the items I have in front of me, they chose to change that particular group. Now, what I'm saying is that, I'm not saying it's incorrect. All I'm saying is that what I keep noticing is, which is good, there are corrections being made, but I'm also starting to see that sometimes you guys, and I'm saying you guys, I don't know if when you're presented the information, you're presented all the facts, because it's not shared that 2006 there was a comprehensive plan done to change the paving standards. That wasn't brought up. It was the other things that were brought up, 88, 90, 2006 was actually omitted. And granted, you guys did research on that, which is, I'm sure, what you did. I'm just kind of curious as to when they're doing a background and a history, why a significant piece might be left out. That doesn't mean that, like I said, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that as I continue to learn more, sometimes a lot of facts are given to help you guys to make the decision, and you have many people to help you with that, including your own research. But I feel like sometimes some of the stuff they give you, they don't give you all the information. When I say they, that would be the staff and the others that you look to when you're trying to make your decision.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that not fully knowing the item that you're talking about and speaking generally, I would say that we just rely heavily upon staff, each and every department, to do their job of the utmost of their ability. And yes, if there is something like it sounds like in the original process of the park or the school rezoning, that there's acknowledgement there and that there's a change there. And whenever we are lacking information, because we get our packet in advance, then staff is on hand essentially 24-hour to provide information that appears lacking, or a commissioner can say, I just feel like I don't have the knowledge that I need in order to weigh in on this issue. So staff, I know, takes very seriously their support role of the commission to make our decisions. So I'm glad that you brought that forward. It sounds like a similar statement that you're saying, that's what our staff role is, and yeah, they may make errors, I make errors, but when we notice that we have text amendments all the time on codes, especially as codes change federally, and we have to go back and pick up changes to those, and then we'll see something come in a few months later that's, didn't we just amend that? And yeah, it's because we didn't see this in this area. So I think that's a part of the evolving process that codes and ordinances bring. But I feel comfortable in the staff that we have behind us in bringing things out to us. I definitely don't know what would benefit a staff member from omitting something or burying something. I think that would only find them a one-way ticket anywhere. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to continue.
Sure,
You
sure.
spoke to And I'll keep it short because I know there's a lot of other people here. But ultimately, I guess what I am referring to Article 11, I'm referring to the constant surfacing. In 2006, there were individuals involved that are still involved, but that information wasn't provided to you when you made your decision based on the information that I saw that you received and what I see in the staff report. So when you said that, while I'm speaking generalities, I'm speaking specifically to Article 11, but I'm also speaking to, it was skipped over on 2006 that they did a comprehensive amendment. And you're right, there may have been a change in the state statute that required them to go revisit that. Unfortunately, that's not a part of the report or minutes to that video, so, but I definitely, I guess the one thing I was the most concerned with was the precedent, and there may already be a precedent, and I'm not aware of that, of doing a first hearing item and doing, since it was introduced at the city commission level, not going through that planning commission part, to where it was city commission, first hearing, emergency, and at least through the minutes, I didn't see the questions of to why it was an emergency.
Yeah, and I can alleviate that concern.
Sure, no
Actually,
problem.
that's a pretty common thing whenever there's an existing something, an existing function that's going on.
Yes, sir.
You need to be diligent towards the function to declare an emergency in order to bring your change in light just as soon as possible. And actually, the state legislature, in awareness of such a thing, has created a change, and you can do first and second readings on one day unless you feel that to do so would not to properly give a community the opportunity to sound off on what would be viewed as a major issue or policy change for the community, because they've come into realization of the jeopardy of time from the time that something's brought up that needs to be changed, and when it's enacted needs to be as short possible so you don't jeopardize anything that's going on. So if you look back, you'll probably see other cases where emergency declaration was made just in order for procedurally to get it enacted as soon as possible.
That's great. Thank
Yep.
you for your time.
Yes,
That's all
thank
I
you,
was-
sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here from the public that would like to bring an issue before the commission? Okay, that takes us to awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, the day of November 5th, 2012, as Extra Mile Day in the City of Salina. Norma Wright, Volunteer Relations Committee Chair, will read the proclamation.
Ms. Wright, welcome.
Proclamation of the City of Salina, Kansas, whereas a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort through volunteerism and service, and whereas Salinans daily give their time, talents, and treasures to help friends, neighbors, and strangers, making our city a better place to live and work through their generosity, and whereas a treasured few of Salina citizens maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly with total effort, commitment, and conviction in mobilizing others to provide and reap the rewards of service. And whereas the City of Salina desires to recognize and celebrate individuals and organizations within the community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow residents of our city. And whereas the Extra Mile American Foundation encourages cities across the country to designate November 1st, 2012 as an Extra Mile Day in observance of such exemplary service. Now, therefore, I, Norman M. Jennings, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim November 5th, 2012 to be Extra Mile Day. In Salina, Kansas, the salute those who go the extra mile in their efforts to make our community, country, and world a better place. Special commendation is hereby given to the more 300 volunteers who participated in the 2012 Spring Spruce Up and Fall Fix Up Days of service to our community through Serving Salina Together and the Volunteer Connection in partnership with the City of Salina. Signed this 5th day of November, 2012, Norm Jennings, Mayor.
Well, thank you for reading that proclamation. Personally, this is where it's so much fun to be a part of this community, is when we're speaking of these kind of things. Are there any other things that you would like to bring out to the public?
Well, today actually is, as November the 5th, is where we give special recognition to those managers, volunteer managers who facilitate the contributions of the volunteers. So we did kind of miss the November 1st, but we do want to give special recognition, and particularly, too, for our spring and fall cleanups that we do. The spring spruce up, we had 200 volunteers covering 165 blocks of North and West Salina, and collecting 29.95 tons of debris, which was sent to the landfill, as well as 1,455 pounds of metal and 475 tires, which were recycled. And then for the fall fix-up, we had 125 volunteers who enhanced the home environments of 8 residents by painting, repairing structures, cleaning gutters and windows, raking and trimming yards. A large crew helped the Martin Luther King Jr. Child Development Center staff and board members renovate their facility by cleaning, painting, replacing cabinets, and refurbishing a storage shed. So with those 2 major projects that we did, we want to give a special recognition to our special contributors, which, to name a few here, Clay Thompson, Serving Salina Together, First Covenant Church, Sunrise Presbyterian Church, the City of Salina, Target, and the Lowe's Heroes programs helped it to make really quite a success. So.
Excellent. That's wonderful to hear. I have a signed copy of that proclamation, if you'd like to come forward. That moves us into public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, application SP 12-1, requesting approval of a special permit to allow the placement of a wireless communication facility in Indian Rock Park.
Open the public hearing on this issue. Mr. Andrews, would you please come?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is an application that was initiated by the Salina Parks and Recreation Department, and it's requesting what we refer to as a special permit to allow the placement of wireless communication facility in Indian Rock Park. And in the use of that term wireless communication facility, that includes both the support structure, or in some cases a tower. It also includes the support equipment, which usually consists of a fenced-in area around the tower or near the tower that is secure, where equipment, backup generators, switching equipment, other significant things in support of the service are located. And I included in your notebooks there at the very end, there was a report there that, if you were interested, gives you an idea on cellular technology, how it works, what trends are going on, and I don't think that you can review this application without having some context of what's going on in the community and the industry that you may not see. And so, John, I'm going to ask you first to put up an inventory of the cell tower sites that we currently have. This might not be particularly easy to read, but starting at the top, there's a 174-foot pole that's out at the end of Enterprise Drive south of Schilling Road. There's a 150-foot monopole that's on Graves Boulevard just north of West Crawford. There's a 225-foot tower that is at the East Crawford Recreation Area on city-owned property there. There's a short tower that's on Franklin on some industrial zone property next to the railroad tracks. That is south of Crawford, between there and Republic. There's a monopole tower on North Front, and there is a tower that was constructed that's basically a light standard at Salina Stadium. There's a tower that was constructed at South High School, one on Copper Court east of Centennial Road, and one on North 9th Street, directly to the south of Thomas Park and to the west of the St. John's Military School. There are also some existing structures, the Kansas Wesleyan Science Building, the Marymount Administration Building, and the United Building that also serve as supports for towers. And the ordinance that was rewritten and adopted in 2001 tried to put an emphasis on encouraging co-location and discouraging the proliferation of new tower construction. And just to give you an idea how that works, John, if you could show the Markley Tower. This is the Markley Tower that's out on the East Crawford Recreation Area, and it's a 225-foot tower, and this is a request we just had to add a fourth set of antennas there that is set up to support 4 co-locating users. Here, these 4 here are all different users that are different heights, and there's also a 5th location there for a public service band, but with that recent addition, that tower is considered full. All the 4 co-location spots are taken. The other item here is the United Building, and you may not notice unless you really focus on it, but the top of the United Building is loaded with antennas serving a variety of cell tower users, or in lieu of a tower, they locate on top of that building. And then out at South High, we have a tower that was recently built. Verizon is right here, and we have a request to add another antenna right here. So when we speak to co-location, co-location is the process of having multiple users locating on the same tower or same support structure. And it may not be immediately noticeable, but in the past 3 months, we have issued permits for 2 for Sprint, 4 for Nextech Wireless, which is new to the community and is not up and operating yet, but they primarily serve western Kansas, and they've decided to enter the Salina market and are trying to get a network up. And they have a proposed rooftop antenna at the Marymount Administration Building, a location on Franklin, a co-location on the North Front Street Tower, and a co-location on the United Building. And we just issued one for AT&T to be on the United Building, and one pending for AT&T on the Graves Boulevard Tower. So that is, we've had 9 requests here recently, and they've gone according to the way that our ordinance is to set up. And what we do when somebody comes into the community is that we hand them the list of the current locations that are supporting existing towers. And the most important thing for them is, 1, elevation. You cannot have cell tower service or cell service without a structure or a tower that provides you elevation. They want speed. They want to be able to get their network up and running as quickly as possible. And they want certainty, which is they want to know the location that they're looking at. They know that they can have the right to place their equipment there. So that does lead them towards the co-location option. In this case, we had been contacted, both the planning staff and the Parks and Recreation staff, because I kept referring them, that the selective site consultants who works on behalf of Verizon have been looking for a place in East Salina for well over a year. and they've identified a need for additional tower and antenna array to help them handle their capacity east of Ohio Street. And they previously had expressed interest in the Gypsum Hill Cemetery, but that's off limits due to statutory limits on the use of public cemetery grounds. They were also potentially interested in the Gypsum Hill Water Tower, but the city has a policy prohibiting the placement of private antennas on city water towers. And their indication to us was that they were going to start experiencing service degradation and drop calls in this area by 2012 without additional capacity. And one of the things that's noted in the background report there is the biggest change or trend here recently is that back in 2001, when we built the very tall tower in East Crawford, the issues then were getting coverage. Could you even get cell service in the eastern part of Salina to make calls? Now the issue is capacity, because people are using their cell phones for much more than just talking. They're texting, they're streaming, they're sending photos, they're doing all kinds of things with their phone. And just like when you have a busy street intersection that has too much traffic, it results in a widening of the street, their network is becoming overloaded. And when their network becomes overloaded, they look for more sites, for more antennas to meet that capacity. So this request by the Parks and Recreation Department, or the proposal, was a proactive proposal, and it would provide three things for a future cellular service provider. It would provide elevation, because Indian Rock Park is an elevated location. It would provide speed, and it would provide certainty, because if the location and the proposal and plan was a pre-approved location, then as providers came in, the Parks and Recreation Department could work with them knowing that the site was already approved. So they advanced this application, and the concept would be to have a cluster of 3 flagpoles, and I guess you can zero in on some of those, John. The concept looking from the east would look something like this. I will take responsibility for the 140-foot number, because if you're going to have 3 flagpoles like that in close proximity, they've got to have a differentiation in elevation, because otherwise they'll block each other's signals. So generally you have to have 1 or 2 at different elevations from the other. The idea behind 140 feet is that that would be the maximum, but it could certainly be reduced from that. It's difficult to see from this perspective, but the diameter at the base of a pole like that would be about 36 inches. So it's not a traditional slender flagpole. It's a fairly substantial pole, but it would serve as a flagpole support. The other aspect of most of these is that you, at the base of the tower, you have a fenced-in equipment area. And John, we've got some different scales of that, but the location that, now John, we got to get back to the talking about the fenced-in area. It would be 4 and 5 and 6. So this is the Indian Rock Lodge right here. This is a conceptual location that would be a 50 by 50 foot area that would be fenced in, that would be available for shelter for equipment, or for equipment cabinets that would go in there. The size is based on the fact that if you have multiple service providers, you're going to have space in there for each of them's equipment. So that there are different options for doing that, and the 50 by 50 area is not set in stone, but this is just an example of a typical fenced-in area where, again, the lodge area is here. There's an existing paved, handicapped accessible space, and then this would be south of the gravel road with the grassy island here that would have the flagpoles. So rather than having a fenced-in area directly underneath the poles, it would be off to the side and connected by a wire. And a part of the reason for this being put forward and why service providers might come to us and ask about park sites is back in 2001, when the City Commission adopted the new regulations. They adopted locational preferences to try to send a message to cellular providers of what the preferred locations were, and publicly owned sites where facilities can be unobtrusively located with regard to visibility, aesthetic appearance, and public safety was the top priority. So that could include athletic fields, recreation areas, parks, school grounds, things of that nature. So when providers see that and they see that the locational preference is athletic fields or school grounds or those types of facilities, they're going to explore those first, and that's why they have focused on some of these public areas. We have highlighted for you a number of the criteria that we have in terms of the security fencing, and we require that all poles in the city of Salina be monopoles, but this would go beyond that and would actually use flagpoles as supports, which would be the least obtrusive type of support that you could come up with, unless you were looking at something else like artificial trees or things of that nature. But the Parks and Recreation Department felt like flagpoles was something that people would expect to have or see in the park. So I'd call your attention to the, starting on page 5 of your report, and there are a number of factors that the ordinance says need to be evaluated in these applications. One is conformity with the city's comprehensive plan, and our comprehensive plan doesn't specifically address cell towers, but it does designate this park area as a public, quasi-public land use, and that is one of the locational preferences in terms of the public-owned land and having open area. That leads us directly to the second one, is the location a preferred site location? And one of the rationales for that is to try to have adequate spaces and setback areas for towers, so they're not close to streets, so they're not close to residential homes and neighborhoods. And so our public open spaces, like recreation areas, athletic fields, school grounds, tend to have large land areas that allows the towers to meet our setback requirements and be separated and buffered from neighborhoods. Since that ordinance was adopted, there's been the large tower approved in East Crawford Recreation Area. At Salina Stadium, there was a camouflage light pole tower approved in 2010, and then at South High's athletic field, a tower also approved in 2010. In their review, the Planning Commission identified Indian Rock Park as unique and possessing certain historical and environmental characteristics that aren't shared by other parks, but they did not specifically enumerate or list those distinguishing characteristics. And so in their recommendation, it's not clear to staff whether they viewed all city parks as inappropriate or just Indian Rock Park. And that is an important consideration because our ordinance identifies parks and recreation areas as among our preferred locations. If we look at compatibility, John, if you want to go back to one of the aerial photos and just look at our surrounding neighborhood. To the north, we have single-family homes and the USD 305 district offices right here. along Gypsum Avenue. To the east, we have the Smoky Hill River, Channel Road, and single-family homes to the east of that. To the south, we have Bill Burke Park, and to the west, we have single-family homes here immediately west of the park. And looking at this, the Parks and Recreation Department put forward what they thought was the flagpoles would be more compatible with a public park setting than a standard monopole tower. However, neighboring residents found that the maximum height of 140 feet, and you have to bear in mind that the flag size, you don't put a conventional size flag on a taller pole. The flag has to be proportionate in size to the size of the flagpole, so it would have a larger flag size, and they felt that was out of scale with surrounding structures and trees in the park. And a majority of the Planning Commission concurred with that conclusion. We did want to point out that elevation is one of the primary considerations in providing cellular service. And it was asked, why not Bill Burke Park, why Indian Rock Park? And it just gets back to elevation, that if you did something in Bill Burke Park, you'd have to do something even taller to make up for the elevation blockage caused by Indian Rock. So that is why Bill Burke was not seriously, or has not seriously been considered by any of the providers. One of the things you're supposed to look at is whether the location and design would adversely affect the visual environment, damage environmental features, or create a risk to public safety. Neighboring residents and a majority of the Planning Commission thought that a flagpole up to 140 feet in height would be visually obtrusive in this setting. There was also a lot of concern expressed that the fenced-in area east of the lodge could be damaging to the park's natural environment. I did want to point out that there are a number of options available as to the number of flagpoles. The proposal of 3 was put forward to allow for maximum usage by all providers, but that could be reduced to 2 or 1. The height is important, but the 140 feet is not that significant. It could be reduced in height from that. The other thing that we would point out is that the fenced-in area is not mandatory. If you thought that you wanted to have an enclosed building instead of a fenced-in open equipment area, that is an option. It was expressed a lot that the compound area was quite large, and we compared it to other ones and didn't find it to be so. The fenced-in area at South High is 34 feet by 58 feet, and the 50 by 50 foot area it's not unusually large compared to other locations within Salina. You are allowed to look at the color and finish of the proposed tower. I think in your packets we had one that was white, flagpoles that were white in color, and then we had another example where they were more of a metallic color. Did want to point out that these are flagpoles, and what separates these from a monopole tower is on a monopole tower you hang, the antennas are hung external on the tower, and the way these work, the cabinetry would be inside the hollow of the pole, so there would not be any exterior antennas on the flagpole. Another thing that you are to look at is whether there's conditions currently exist or can be created to screen the proposed tower site. There are no, with the grassy islands, there's no real trees or structures or features that would hide the flagpole location, but that was not the intent, to hide the flagpoles as they are right out in the open in this grassy area. From the Parks and Recreation Department's perspective, since it was a camouflage option, there wasn't any need to hide or disguise that. Then a question comes up about screening the ground level equipment or the tower base. Again, we noted that the flagpoles would be located here, and there wouldn't be a fenced-in compound directly under there. It would be off to the side, and whatever screening that the commission felt was appropriate, or even not having the open area at all. If you go over to Salina Stadium, except for one item, all the equipment there is inside a building. It's not out in the open. So that is an option. Another thing that you look at is whether the scale of the proposed facility, how it is in height compared to surrounding land uses. And again, the majority of planning commissioners concluded that the maximum flagpole height was out of scale with the Indian Rock Park setting. The lack of tall trees or other tall structures in the vicinity of the flagpole location. And again, we wanted to bring up the fact that this represents 140 foot there and those slightly lower, but again, you could reduce it all the way down to a single flagpole that was in the 100 to 120 foot height range, and that would still meet the needs of one or two carriers. So it would be up to you to decide whether the reduced height would be more in scale with the park setting than the 140 foot maximum proposed. This property is not located at an entryway into the city. And then the 10th item there was a lot of discussion at the public meeting and at the Planning Commission hearing about the historical and archaeological significance of Indian Rock Park. And just from a staff reporting perspective, we have to report that Indian Rock Park is not on the national or state register of historic places, and it's not in the environs of any National Register property. It is designated as a conservation property, which just means that some of the notable features in the park are protected from being demolished or removed without a review by the Heritage Commission, but this proposal is not proposing to demolish or remove any of those features. So despite its lack of formal designation, the majority of the planning commissioners found Indian Rock Park to be a historically significant area where these type of facilities should not be allowed. So again, it might alter the visual appearance of the park, but this is not a proposal that would demolish or remove any significant features in the park. The other thing I would mention is that every tower that gets built in Salina, the Federal Telecommunications Act requires that a environmental protection agency review of the tower site be done, and part of that environmental review is to look at the impact on national or state register properties. And again, if that review were done in this case, this was not a site that would be identified as a national or state register property, although there is a perception that it is a historically significant place. So that leads us to our comments from a staff perspective is, and looking at it not just from the reviewing side, but also from the Parks and Recreation Department side, is public parks or public parks and recreation facilities are identified as a preferred location site for new towers. What they're proposing here in terms of a flagpole design is a stealth or camouflage design. So what they've put forward is something that they have tried to be, at least meet the spirit and intent of our wireless communication facility ordinance. At the same time, not all parks or recreation areas or athletic fields are equal. All of them have different attributes and different environmental settings. So your role in this case is to review the Parks and Recreation Department's proposal and the Planning Commission's recommendation in light of the factors that I've identified for you in this report, and determine whether the placement of up to 3 flagpoles or some alternative proposal but would be compatible with this park setting and surrounding land uses. If you were to concur with the Planning Commission that this application should be denied, then you need to provide staff with some guidance about either we have it wrong in our ordinance as far as what our preferred location sites are, and that should be changed, or your other option would be to just articulate specific findings indicating what distinguishes Indian Rock Park from other city parkland in the community. And that was the sense that staff got from the Planning Commission, that they didn't think that the preferred locations were wrong, but that Indian Rock Park was distinct and unique from other park locations in the community. Along with that, there was a protest petition that was submitted, which you have in your notebooks there, and that petition was signed by 40 lot owners who own property within 400 feet of Indian Rock Park, and it was filed within the 14-day protest period, and all the 40 that were eligible signatures are within that protest area, and that comprised 38% of the eligible protest area, making it a valid petition. The impact of a valid protest petition is it requires a supermajority or 4 affirmative votes to approve the request. And back in September 12th, city staff hosted a public informational meeting on Indian Rock Park at the USD 305 administrative offices, and we introduced the concept, some of the future plans for the park, and one of those, John, if you could find and locate the information about the enhancements to the lodge there. One of the things that was discussed at the public informational meeting was just looking at this, and this configuration here is a location for an enhanced Indian Rock Park lodge, and also discussed was the enhancements that are being made to the trail system around the perimeter of the park. If you could go on to the elevations, John.
Dean, conferred with legal counsel, and given that this is good information, but given that we are in a planning-type scenario versus a capital improvement or some other scenario, the thinking is it's probably best not to address this aspect of it at this time and go ahead and just try to keep it to the planning aspects of the request.
These were just items that were shared with the public at the informational meeting, but they're not tied to this particular application. The other items, John, there, and again, it's not this particular application, but it just shows you as an alternative. If you could go to the items that are related to the Verizon site plan and equipment details, John. These are just examples of what could be in terms of alternatives to 3 flagpoles, a single flagpole. Also, this is similar to what's over at the Salina Stadium, and that is an equipment shelter, which is designed to accommodate generators and any of those other items inside the 4 walls of a building, as opposed to having an outdoor fenced-in equipment area. So we had the public informational meeting on the 12th, and then there was a public hearing on the 18th of September in front of the Planning Commission. At the conclusion of that, they voted 6-3 to recommend that this request be denied, and they found that the flagpole height and flag size would have an adverse visual impact on the park, and the proposed location and size of the fenced-in area could damage the park's naturalistic environment. They thought the flagpole height was out of scale with the park setting, and they found that Indian Rock Park is a historically significant area which is not suitable for location of wireless communication facilities. So they tied their decision back to standards 4, 8, and 10. They also expressed a desire to have the city re-examine its policy prohibiting the placement of private antennas on water towers, but that is not before us today.
Dean, can I ask you about that real quick? Because on page 3, on our preferred location sites, we specifically list water towers.
Yes, the prohibition on placing them on water towers is a policy, it's not an ordinance. And so it's possible there are some other water towers that are not municipal water towers, and we even have some examples of false water towers that were built that aren't actually water towers, but actually support cellular antennas. So there is such a thing as a water tower that's not really a water tower that supports those. But that is a policy that the city has in terms of there are no private antennas on any of the city's water towers.
Well, that, to me, makes no sense at all.
Where does the preferred location sites, is that in our ordinance?
Yes.
So our ordinance and our policies are in direct conflict with each other?
Yeah.
Well, again, there are water towers that may not be municipal water towers.
Well, it says publicly owned, such as water towers.
Yeah, my thoughts are, we need to just simply change our, if it's an ordinance, we need to change our ordinance. I mean, we were saying we don't want to put them on water towers, but we're going to put them in the middle of one of our parks. I think we need to, I can't even believe we got to this point that we're even discussing this. A water tower should be our first choice before we ever even consider parks as an option. I can't even understand why it's still on our ordinance. I mean, why is that?
And I think we may be ahead. We can jump into that debate. You don't have to be sorry. But I think it's pertinent as we go on, but as far as getting the staff report, I think the question was, why is there this conflict? And you said policy versus ordinance, and they're conflicting. So we can move past that, hold that for the debate section, but we want to finish staff report.
That is a discussion for another day, because this is a specific proposal for Indian Rock Park.
Right.
And so your alternatives today is, after reviewing those standards, if you disagree with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, a motion should be made to approve the permit as requested with or without any conditions or modifications. That would require 4 votes. You could request that the applicant modify their proposal and approve a permit for a plan that decreases the number of flagpoles to 2 or 1, reduces the height of those flagpoles to a height lower than 140 feet, changes the location. If you think there's a more suitable location within the park, you could recommend or choose that the size of the proposed fenced-in equipment area be reduced. You could decide that it should be relocated to a different location, or you could decide that it could be eliminated altogether. Those would only be aspects of you approving a modified proposal. That would also require 4 votes. You could return this item to the Planning Commission and ask them to provide you with more specific findings as to what Indian Rock Park and what makes it unique compared to other public open spaces, or you could concur with their recommendation and deny the request to locate the flagpole supports in the park.
Okay. What would fall under the lines of somebody not making a recommendation for a proposal, but if they wanted to consider an alternate proposal? Is there a staff recommendation and a vote requirement for that?
Well, any action today that would approve a proposal for a wireless communication facility in some form would require the 4 affirmative votes. Or if you wanted to provide the outlines of a proposal that would be more to your liking, then you would always have the option of sending that back to the Planning Commission and having that alternate proposal reviewed by them and having a recommendation on the alternate proposal. But the only proposal that the Planning Commission acted on was the proposal for the 3 flagpoles in the fenced-in equipment area.
I just asked that in light of any citizen input or discussion amongst the commission. if there becomes a feeling of, yeah, well, we would like that to be brought back forward, the mechanism then would be to vote affirming it to go to Planning Commission to be brought forward as modified.
Since we don't have something that we can put up there that everybody can see today, the appropriate thing to do would be, if you're interested in entertaining a modified proposal, would be to have that developed and reviewed by the Planning Commission and them making a recommendation on it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm for that, I just didn't see it nestled within the options. Okay, super. Are there any questions of staff at this point in time?
I'm just curious as to why it's brought to us by Parks and Rec and not by the applicant.
They were trying to be proactive and put something forward so that they were, part of the aspect of this is that in order for anything to actually get built here, there would have to be a lease of some form developed between the cellular service provider and the city of Salina. And since we were the owners, and we're looking at, it's primarily to have more input, and rather than responding to a request from a private provider, the Parks and Recreation Department looked at what they felt would fit best within the park, and so their idea was to put the flagpole proposal forward. If that was approved, then as providers came in, they would be told that it would be flagpoles and not anything else, rather than responding to other proposals.
Okay. I have a question on one of the photos. There was a capture of the building with, I think, an emergency siren pole or some pole that's out there now. Does anybody here have information on the height of that pole? That's one thing, when I look over at the park, I can grab in my head as a scale, but I don't know that pole right there. I don't know whether that's a 90-foot pole or a 20-foot pole. I just know what it looks like.
Well, the height of the roof, the line there is probably about 14 feet, so I wouldn't say that pole's much over 25 to 30 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Dean, just going back to, as this may be part of my direction, what was the concept when we sort of had an ordinance against putting, were you around, I mean, obviously you've been around, were you involved in those discussions when it was originally decided not to allow cell towers on top of our city-owned or public-owned water towers, or?
My belief at the time, having worked on the ordinance directly, is that it was put in there under the thought that that policy could at some point change. And if it changed, then that would be something that you would want to encourage co-location on an existing structure. As we've identified, the United Building, the Marymount Administration Building, and the Kansas Wesleyan Science Building are three structures that currently support antennas. And I believe it was left in there because it was believed that at some point the policy could change.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, one other aspect to it, too, is there are certain places that are sensitive, not from an aesthetic perspective, but in this case, a functional perspective. And quite honestly, Martha and her folks do a really good job bringing to you actions to keep our towers maintained. But there are a lot of communities that don't do such a great job, and they have issues with their water supply because of contamination in their towers. And sometimes they can be a little bit hesitant to want to modify that tower in any way structurally, with concerns that, well, what if something goes wrong? If it's done right, it's fine, but a lot of times that's the case. It's a possibility that might have been a factor, and why not water towers?
Okay.
Any other questions of staff?
I know for a fact that the City Commission, when they knew it, had that at the time, they knew that the policy prohibited it, and it was in the ordinance, and the thought that the policy might be revisited at some time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Before we move into public comment, I need to disclose a conversation on this item with a citizen. This has been out there in the public for quite some time, and on my way home, I was stopped by a citizen that talked about this action and discussion at the Planning Commission and voiced some concerns, no facts that we haven't heard today, and I'm sure comments that we haven't heard. I also am a resident in not the affected area, but an area local to this.
Yeah, I also received a phone call, but again, no information that wasn't already presented.
At this point in time, we open it up to citizens' comments. There's quite a few citizens here today, so to that I only just say respectfully, if you don't repeat some comments made by other citizens, and try to hold your comments as short as possible. If you'd state your name and your address for the record, please.
I'm Deborah Devine at 1748 Glen Avenue, and I'm just outside of the 400-foot limit, but I certainly am impacted by this proposal. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I have sent you an email about this, and I just want to reiterate that unobtrusive 3 140-foot towers that are a yard in diameter are not. They are very obtrusive. And I question whether it's at the entry of a city or not when flights fly over Indian Rock Park and Gypsum Hill as well. And that is indeed an entry into the city. As far as the state historic site designation or national designation, I'm trying to form a committee, and I've already started doing research to make that application for that designation, because I believe that Indian Rock is indeed historically significant, not only to this community, but to this region. In fact, our very own website for the city of Salina says it's a historic place. I don't think we need to be monkeying with the visual landscape when as I understand it, and I don't profess to be a cell tower expert by any means, but the whole industry is getting smaller, less coverage distances, so that their antennas can be put on existing utility poles and not on 140-foot towers. So instead of decimating the visual landscape of this community and ruining the place where people go to look at the sunset and look at the sunrise and look at stars at night and enjoy the out of doors right in the middle of a community, we won't be doing this.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you. Bill Medina, and this is my wife Peggy, 2 Riverwood Circle. We have 2 properties within the 400-foot area that received the letters. Indian Rock Park is unique in that it is different than most of the other parks in Salina. It doesn't have ball fields or tennis courts or entertainment venues. It is, for the most part, a low-traffic scenic wildlife habitat. People go to Bill Burke or Dean Evans Stadium or even Oakdale Park and expect to see hot dog vendors and pop machines. These are higher traffic parks. People go to Indian Rock Park to exercise, meditate, and take in the natural beauty of the park and enjoy the peace that, for the most part, has not been domesticated. Most everyone here probably has a story about Indian Rock Park, whether it was your first date, whether you went sledding down the slope, whether you saw wildlife or you swam in the pond when there was water in the pond. If this commercialization is approved, you will no longer be able to sit on the rock, meditate, and appreciate the view without hearing the 24/7 noise of air conditioning equipment or generators running, or the snapping of enormous flags that will come along with this breach of nature. At 140 feet tall, they are as tall as the United Life Building. If you could pull up the elevation of the United Life Building, I'd appreciate that. Next time you're driving down Iron, take a look at the United Life Building and picture 3 towers this tall or thereabouts. And I think if I could walk over to the screen.
I would just invite you not to say anything over there because you won't be caught on microphone, but please point to.
I can't read that number, but the research that I did, it was 120 feet just to this point right here. 140 feet, that tall. So 3 towers, that big, Indian Rock Park.
I'll just have you repeat those comments when you get back up, because folks listening in at home will
The
miss
research
those.
that I did was that the first level that you see going east on Iron Street, that first level of building is 120 feet of United Building. So imagine 20 feet taller that for the maximum height. Servicing the equipment within the poles will require the constant placement of large cranes and support equipment. Because all the equipment's inside the poles, they have to be lifted out to service. So you can have cranes up there constantly servicing the equipment. If you allow these towers to be built, the natural beauty will be gone forever. Once you open the gates to commercialization of our public lands and parks for money, will you ever be able to say no without discriminating? Take a look around this room. This room is about 48 by 48. It would be bigger than this room, the equipment that's proposed now. The other thing is that the proposed site where they're talking about putting it just south or just east of the existing lodge building, the ground slopes like this at a pretty drastic rate. A lot of dirt will be brought in to level a 50 by 50 foot pad in order to provide that area. Think about what all those trees will be coming out. It's going to change that look forever. We were told that Indian Rock Park is not in the flight path of aircraft, but yet a couple of days after the Planning Commission meeting, my wife and I were walking our dog at Lookout Point, and 2 Army helicopters flew directly over Indian Rock Park on their way to the airport. We were told that the poles wouldn't need beacons, but yet I spoke with a retired National Guard pilot who said at the very minimum they would need nighttime beacons. We were told that Marymount was full up with towers, but yet the next day they came out and said they had space available. We were shown pictures like a carrot on a stick of a new lodge building with a wraparound deck overlooking the city. First of all, there's a pretty sharp drop-off, more so than what's indicated on the elevation there. It's like this on the back side of the lodge. Can you imagine kids rappelling over the edge of the deck? That would be a maintenance and liability nightmare. Would you want to have a wedding, reunion, or family gathering in a lodge building right next to a 50 by 50 compound with chain link fence and probably barbed wire on top and air conditioning equipment running 24/7 with the flapping sound of huge flags on these poles? I went online and I was sent a link to the antenna tower lighting and marking requirements site by the FAA and FCC, and they do have specific height requirements that require beacons, but they are also, as a provision, acknowledging within a given airspace the highest points, and that clearly would be the highest point anywhere close to the airport for safety lighting. And having said all that, why is it the function of the City of Salina to solve technology issues for a for-profit company? I'm just not understanding that. Please do not allow commercialization of this historical park, the tallest and most beautiful view of Salina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I forgot 2 points that I wanted to make. Flags will need to be lighted 24 hours a day if they're put on those poles. And also, the Gypsum Hill, for your information, Gypsum Hill water tower is 115 feet tall, according to Mrs. Tasker.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Kelp. I live at 330 Indiana. I have printed here what the City of Salina has on their website about Indian Rock, and it kind of tells you a little bit about the history and the significance of this place. So I'll go ahead and pass this out. Pass them around. I'm a lifelong resident of Salina, and I've lived for nearly 20 years directly across the street from Indian Rock. It's literally my front yard. Over the years, I've seen firsthand what a beautiful and peaceful place it is, and I know how lucky we are to have a place that is so close to nature. There is no place in Salina that is so peaceful and still untouched by technology that people can go watch the sunrise or the sunset over our city. Every day, I see how much this beautiful little park is enjoyed. There are picnics, bird watching, hiking, fishing, sledding, daily walkers, stargazing, field trips from schools, football games, frisbee disc, and many, many other activities. Have you ever seen the field full of sunflowers when the sun's coming up over the city? Or the natural prairie grass back there? Or sat at the top and watched the fireworks on the evening of the 4th of July spread across the horizon? It's a sight you would never forget. Indian Rock is an important part of this city's history. It's the site of a documented Indian battle that resulted in Salina even being settled here. If not for this battle, Mr. Campbell, a Salina founder, stated he would not have settled here and that Salina would have been found in Northeast closer to Manhattan. The history of Indian Rock is told through the artifacts and documentation that the museum has displayed in their exhibits. Arrowheads and other little pieces of history are still being discovered there today. It is a sacred and vital piece of Salina's history. Men, women, and children are documented as being buried there as a result of their fight to keep this land, which resulted in our city today. Its untouched and natural environment that even the Kansas Historical Society does recognize on their website brings so much peace in a world that is so unsettled. It is a sanctuary for wildlife such as deer, fox, heron, a variety of birds, and many other beautiful things, as well as our citizens, and it should be preserved. I understand the need for advancing technology, and the Salina must continue to advance into tomorrow. But I also understand the need for preservation of our history for the future. This is just a small but very special little piece of land that holds such a huge piece of importance. We were told at the information meeting that there is no guarantee that the revenue from these towers would be used to build this proposed lodge or any improvements. Please do not discredit with construction for technology. Do not destroy this little sanctuary of nature and history. Because once it's gone, we can't get it back. And I ask that you please consider what has been said here today with your hearts. I ask that you do not vote to destroy this small but important piece of our history. Let's keep technology out of there, because once we open that door, we're going to have the United building on top of Indian Rock. And we're going to have such a beautiful little park gone. Please deny this. If nothing else, let's look into this more. I, for one, would be willing to volunteer my time to help find other options for this. You can go along that dike. That dike is a long way down there. There's a lot of things we can do. But let's not destroy this. All of that heavy equipment up there, it is going to take away. They are finding artifacts all the time. It is going to destroy that. We won't get that back. Please deny this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a newcomer here on the post. I didn't think I was going to come here today, and then I started thinking about it. My name's Don Timmel. I live at 534 Upper Mill Heights Drive. Lived there about 10 years. I can see that area when the trees are a little barren in the wintertime, and we'll look over there. But I have a story to tell, and I'll get it over with quickly. I am a grain consultant that travels the world looking at wheat. My specialty is wheat. And we host here in Salina, most of you don't know this, some do, about 17 people that travels with us looking at the wheat crop in Kansas in April. They come from the major food companies in our whole country here, and then some from overseas. And we have some characters, and we have a lot of fun, but we get the job done for the companies. And we host them at our house, and they eat dinner at Marginelli's, and we have a great time. But here's the story. We have a guy from Argentina and from Australia, and the Australian guy is kind of a clown, but he's a historian. He likes to go to various countries and look at their history. And the guy that heads up our group wants us all to go to nutty places or fun places to see while we're looking at these crops. How about in La Crosse, the Barbed Wire Museum? How about the things like the Hall of Shame in Norton, where everybody that lost the presidential running of the presidential elections since George Washington has their picture on a veranda in the bank in Norton, and everybody's got to go if they're new on the trip to go to look at these things. Well, one of the things that I thought, we got some stuff here, so I take them over there and look at Indian Rock and give them the history about that. And this Australian is really a nut. Anyway, he's just a great guy and a very important official within the agriculture state of Australia. So I emailed him one day and I said, they're going to knock down and screw up that park over there where the Indians are supposedly buried. And yesterday, he emailed me back, and he said, and you can hear this in the Aussie language, mate, he said, gee whiz, you guys over there break down and shut down and cut down and destroy all kinds of stuff and then build modern-looking things. What the hell's wrong with you? And we emailed back, and I said, I don't really know, but we'll find out what happened, and I'll go there and speak about it today. And that's what I'm saying. Thank you. I hope you have some common sense and study this more securely, and the people on Upper Mill Heights like what they have. The people that built there, the Morrisons and other people, built there for their ability to look at the river, the sunsets, and nothing to interfere with it, and you want to screw them around in our parks. That's nuts. You're a bunch of nuts. I love it that you're working on this, and I hope that you just take another look. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Doug Rudick. I live at 808 Rainbow Drive here in Salina. I am also a member of the Park and Recreation Advisory Board, and I also have the privilege of being the Vice President of the Smoky Hills Audubon Society. I want to make 2 points. First of all, you might not be aware, and I'd be surprised if you were, some are in this room, but currently I am a chairman of a committee that is going to bring a festival here to Salina on April 21st of 2013, next spring. It is called Discover Salina Naturally, and we want to show the citizens of Salina and the surrounding area the past, present, and hopefully the greener future of the city of Salina. Now, I'll cut to the chase. One of the features we're planning on doing are having bird walks. We plan to have wildflower tours, and believe it or not, birders and people that like wildflowers will travel to communities to see these types of events. This is a convention of sorts. It's a one-day event, but we anticipate we should have lots of folks come. And Indian Rock Park is one of our primary places we're going to take folks to go birding and to see native prairie. So I would encourage you that there's financial advantage to leaving things as they are. But anyway, this is called Discover Salina Naturally, and we are working diligently on bringing this together. My second point is that this proposal is brought by the Park and Recreation Department, but yet, as a member of the Park and Recreation Advisory Board, we never had, as a board, an opportunity to vote on what our opinion would be of this. The meeting that, and I look back through our minutes, and the minutes of September 19th, which was the day actually after the Planning Commission's meeting, it was brought to us as basically a report saying that the Planning Commission had turned it down. Now, my thoughts are if we have an advisory commission or an advisory board, we're meant to give some input to you folks. Now, I have no way of knowing what the vote would have been if we had the opportunity to vote on it. I myself know, personally, I would have voted no. So these are the 2 points that I wanted to bring, but please consider it, and let's leave Indian Rock Park the way it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's sitting so long, I can't walk.
That happens to us, too. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Marjorie Streckfus, 2120 Applewood Lane in Salina, not too far from Indian Rock Park. I'm also a member of the Smoky Hills, hope I voice last, Smoky Hills Audubon Society. Just a few points. What is this place we call Indian Rock Park? It presently is a very special place overlooking Salina that sits in the valley of the Smoky Hill River, viewed from the park's east side. On last Friday, the mature
excuse me, a mature bald eagle was coursing its way northward along the river, probably looking for a little dinner of fish. Indian Rock Park, as others have stated, is away from much of the footprints of our technology world. What is there? An historical site of a last Indian battle in the area. It is an archaeological site where rocks from all three major time periods, the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, the Cenozoic, rocks are there, as identified by Nick Fent. It is a prairie site where all the flowers in this book by Clinton Owensby, there's about 162 of them, all of those were photographed by a lady that took her kids to walk there every day. 162 pictures. All of them have been authenticated as being at Indian Rock Park, 162 of them. There's a nature trail that finds many of our native prairie grasses that were enhanced several years ago and now provides a sanctuary for native butterflies and other insects, birds, and critters. During bird migration times, it is a remaining spot for food and rest for many types of migrators, including little warblers and my favorite, the little ruby-crowned kinglet. And you know, as we more and more develop everything on this earth, these migrating birds don't find the spots that they've been used to going to. They need extra places. But all year round, there are brown thrashers. There are a lot of different nesting birds that nest at Indian Rock Park, too. So I have a cell phone. Modern civilization gives us appreciated wonders not imagined a few years ago. But we share the earth with many species that are also necessary for the health of this planet. And at times, we humans, not at times, many times, we humans need a respite from technology, a time of knowing our natural roots. We want to preserve Indian Rock Park as a place not compromised by the huge equipment needed to construct these cell towers, probably tearing up a lot of that prairie, not compromised by their foreign presence and flapping flags, not compromised by an area appropriated for a support building and vehicles. So I thank you very much. And
Thank you, ma'am.
couldn't understand my babbling.
I think you did fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Jennifer Benia Baker. I live at 1601 Gypsum Avenue. It's directly on top of Gypsum Hill. I like to say that Indian Rock is my front yard, the only front yard that I don't have to mow, so it makes it a lot easier for me. I lived in Colorado for many, many years, in Colorado Springs specifically for over 10 years. And one of the reasons I like Colorado Springs was because of Pikes Peak. And when I decided to move back to Salina, I looked all over Salina, specifically for a place that reminded me of Colorado. And when I moved and I found this location of this house, it had a Colorado-style house alongside with I consider a majestic view of what we have as the best part of Salina. Many years, I grew up there. Mayor Jennings, when I were in cross-country together, Monday, we were doing the hill workout in cross-country. Remember those days? I had great memories of this. And when I heard that they were going to do these cell towers, I went to the meetings. I wanted to learn all about what was going on. And I was like, okay. Then I started seeing how high these towers are going to be to obstruct my view, my majestic view of what I thought took back from Colorado was the only view that we have in Salina that honors what we truly are Salinans. And there's no parks, no anything. I see everyday people walking by. I see turkeys, I see deer, I see everything. And if you ever heard of one flag, a couple months ago I was visiting an outside museum, and there was one flag flapping in the wind. I'm like, what is that sound? It was so overpowering. I'm like, I cannot imagine this is going to be 3 flags outside my front yard, let alone every 4th of July we have these big parties, and I walk across the street, and there I see all July 4th. We see people walking up the hill. This is going to obstruct everybody's view for July 4th. So I think you concur with everybody that's here. They do not wish this to overtake what we belong as Salina, as our best part of Salina, as our Indian Rock memories. And I just wanted to see that Indian Rock is our little mini Pikes Peak. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, running the hill of Indian Rock as cross-country was a miserable memory. Thank you for bringing that back.
That sounded like an open invitation to the next 4th of July party at Jennifer's house.
Yeah, that's right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello there. My name is Mark Newbrand, and I live at 730 Meadowbrook Road. And I had a whole bunch of things here I wanted to say, but I'm just going to make this short. I've lived in Salina 34 years. I've been to 0 city commission meetings. I would be conservative in saying that I've been to Indian Rock Park maybe 150. That would be the conservative side. I'd say probably 300 to 400 times. Taking kids over there and skipping rocks on that pond that currently has no water in it is probably why it's so shallow. I've taught many kids how to skip rocks. I was just over there Friday night, and the area just south of that building was a densely wooded area, quite rocky, and I was kind of surprised by the birds that I saw flying in there. And I can't imagine that you're going to level that. It makes no sense to me. In regard to the flags, calling these flag poles when they're really giant structures makes no sense. They're the height of a telephone pole with another telephone pole, with another telephone pole, with another telephone pole on top of them. I called Jim Clark Auto over in Junction City where they have the big flag, and I said, how's that flag going for you? And I happened to be talking to the person that pays their bills, and she says, that flag has to be replaced twice a year. Every 3 months it has to be taken down and repaired. The flag costs $2,537. Twice a year it has to be replaced. And she said, you can't just lower the flag because a flag cannot touch the ground. So we have to bring flatbed trucks in there, and she said it's just quite the maneuver to try and get that flag down. Of course, it has to be lit up all the time, and I just do not feel like it would be the right thing to put in that park. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Howdy, J.C. Sadler out of Dallas, Texas. Don't have to live here to talk on this, do I? Nope. Okay, good. I don't know how this came about, but about 3 months ago, I've actually started working on a process on the same tower scenario. Right here. Bicentennial Center, somewhere like...
Okay, come on back over here, sir, so actually everybody will be able to hear you and the audience and at home.
Yes, sir. So the exact same scenario, which looks to be about a little less than a half a mile to the west, right beside the Bicentennial Center. About the same thing, a lot less impact, and I just wanted to bring that up because that is always an option, because I myself am going forward with that, trying to push that through permitting process. So I just wanted to let you know that that is an option, and it's pretty darn close.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. Sure. Hello, I'm Jeffrey Kassoff. I live at 407 Blake Street in Ellsworth, Kansas. I'm an officer of the Smoky Hill Audubon chapter. I'm the treasurer. And my background is in engineering, so the other members of our chapter thought that I should put my 2 cents in about this project. And I can reiterate that the commercial development of Indian Rock Park will be disruptive to the wildlife and the flora, and all of the aesthetic and just the value of the park is worth keeping. But in addition to that,
One of our board members said that I should look at some peer review research on the effect of the electromagnetic radiation from cell towers on wildlife. And there is literature out there. Each article is titled "Possible Adverse Effects on Wildlife," on songbirds, on other avian species, and I think it's imprudent and to just assume that because the FCC says that you can't justify denying a permit based on what they call environmental effects, particularly about safety to health of people. I don't think, and from what I've read, in fact, there are organizations that state that there are court cases now that are trying to justify not putting in to areas like wildlife sanctuaries and refuges cell towers just for this reason, that it may be harmful to the wildlife, and those cases may go forward, even though it's not affecting humans, not affecting school children. It may be a justification, and apparently the FCC 1996 regulations specifically say that you have to have substantial evidence to deny a sighting location. And so I really believe that it's important that if you do take the third course of action of sending this back to the Planning Commission, that they really do develop substantial evidence so that you don't end up with Verizon or other cell phone companies saying that this is the best site in Salina. We're going to sue you because you're denying it. You really need to have that substantial evidence to be able to defend that the local government needs to defend itself if you decide that this park is not the right place. When Dean Andrews was speaking about an hour ago or so, even though he was trying to be as objective as possible, I had read through the packet on your website, and it was very clear to me that at the Planning Commission meeting where they voted against this, that they had listened to the people come in and tell about the historic significance of the site and the value of this park, how natural it was. It was not like a recreational center, and so it was very clear that their decision, their 6-3 decision to deny the proposal, was based on that input, and yet the staff report says, well, they weren't clear. And so again, if you send it back to that Planning Commission, I'm sure they can be much more articulate if that's what's needed, so that you can differentiate between parks that have nature walks like Lakewood and Indian Rock, and be able to say that these are parks that we don't want to consider our preferred sites. And again, Dean Andrews, when he went to the ordinance, he said, in bold, we say the preferred sites are parks, but he didn't mention was that under the preferred location sites, item 3 says if it's a sensitive location site, such as an environmentally sensitive area or a local landmark, it doesn't have to be registered with the federal government as a historic site. If the people in this community think it's an historic location, you should respect them. If they wanted to burn down City Hall, you might override the protest petition, but I just don't see that the residents in this area are asking for a lot. And the last thing was the list of the towers. They call them ASRs, Antenna Structure Registration, with the FCC. When you go to the FCC site, there are 43 or 46 towers that are listed as part of Salina. Extends out into the county a few miles, and of those 43, 18 of them are over 200 feet, including the one in in East Crawford Recreation Center. And I was confused because in 2002, it was erected. 2001, the ordinance says monopoles, the ordinance says under 200 feet, and it goes up at 228 feet. So there had to be a special variance to allow a tower, it's only one of 18, to be over 200 feet and not to be a monopole, or in this case, a flagpole, a stealth tower. So realizing that, I said, well, why wouldn't you put a 200-foot tower similar to the East Crawford in the Bill Burke Park? Bill Burke is a recreational area, doesn't have any environmental, ecological significance. Bill Burke is 75 feet below Indian Rock. True, the elevation is an important factor, but if you raise a tower from 130 feet, as the Verizon, even though 140 is the max, the 130 that Verizon is asking for, if you raise it up to 225 feet, you make up for that difference in elevation. So you can, even though it's not feasible, based on the report, to use Bill Burke, there's nothing to stop you from from selecting alternate sites from Indian Rock Park, is my point there. And I guess the last thing I would say is that, again, if you do conclude to not override the Planning Commission, you send it back to the Planning Commission. As Doug Rudick said, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Panel and other competent groups can support this idea of the historic and environmental significance, so that you will be able to have evidence to support this location. So that's what I have to say. And what I just read from is like a position statement opposing it by the Board of Directors of the Smoky Hill Audubon Society. 4 of our members signed it. I attached the list of 43. I attached the location of the 43 towers around Salina. And the most interesting thing that I attached that I'd like to give to you that might help your staff in the future is there is a nonprofit corporation called Electromagnetic Radiation Policy Institute that seems even-handed, and they give all kinds of guidelines. It's called a Citizens Toolbox, but it gives all kinds of guidelines for how communities can satisfy the FCC regulations and not get themselves in trouble. And I thought it's only 2 pages in length, these 2 pages, and I thought you might find your staff may find it interesting, because not only does it talk about wildlife in one paragraph, it also talks about schools and about the idea that these cell towers, yes, you have to have them in your community, you need the technology. I am an engineer, I know what technology is good for, but the idea of when you do pick sites that you try to space those cell towers at least 1,500 feet from schools, even though you have one that's actually on top of South Central?
Yes.
Yes. So I thought that your staff might find this information interesting for the future, because obviously you can't reverse leases that you've already agreed to, but you might in future planning might be able to take this into account.
Yeah.
Okay?
If you'd like to give it to City Manager, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This gentleman was coming up, yep.
I'm Harold Lear, live at 612 Max Avenue. I came to Salina in 1929, and as a young kid, I grew up here. And I can remember when I first got my bicycle in about the 7th grade, I rode over to Indian Rock Park, and I've been going there a lot of times ever since. Indian Rock Park is my favorite one in Salina. And one of the things that I knew about Indian Rock Park is this pond used to be called Bottomless because a guy was fishing in a boat out in the pond. He dropped his line down I think it was 50 or 100 feet, he couldn't hit bottom. So somebody's been throwing rocks in there.
I think we heard from that man earlier, yeah.
Anyway, my contention is that it's not fair for commercial companies like cell tower companies to just one or two or maybe 6 of them get the advantage of being on Indian Rock Park when all the other ones they're competing against aren't going to be able to do that. Or else if you allow the 6 to get on there, why can't the others build towers on top of Indian Rock Park too? How are you going to stop them? And if you allow that, what about other commercial entities like fast food restaurants? Maybe they'd like to build up there too. So I don't think you should start letting commercial entities be on top of Indian Rock Park.
Thank you.
I think it's just like opening up a can of worms. If you take off the lid, out come the worms, and they'll slide down that slippery slope.
Thank you.
There goes my restaurant idea for Indian Rock. Wouldn't there be fast food? It was going to be a classy, nice place, but dang it.
I'm Norman Mantle from Headville, and I've got land up in Lincoln County where the wind towers are. I hope you turn this down, but go further into the future. Look into a conservation easement trust. Have you ever heard of it?
Personally, no.
They
I would
stopped
sure
them.
our staff would, but I don't.
They stopped them in Junction City at the military base. They wanted to put towers up there where the Fort Riley is. The man gave 4,000 acres to the government under the Conservation Easement Trust. Nothing can be done to it. You can't develop it, you can't build on it, or nothing. You've got a nice park out here, you better save it.
Thank you. Any other citizens?
Hi, good evening. My name's Justin Anderson. My address is 9900 West 109th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. After listening to all the concerned citizens and staff report, do not deny that you guys love Indian Rock Park, and I don't want to do anything to tarnish that, and I'm sure that staff, Public Works don't want to do that either. What I would request is that we take some time, remand back to Planning Commission. We can all work on maybe a bit more feasible design or whatever the outcome may be. Bring it back to you folks, and see where the cards lay after we correlate a bit more on an application. Typically, when we supply a wireless application, it's a book, and we have all of our reports in line. You can actually see what all the environmental effects are of the park. Not doubting that people find artifacts there and so forth, and lots of great stories. I think that there's been some information that is true in certain areas, and sometimes antennas are put on utility poles, and sometimes the city governments and the communications tower companies do work together. That benefits both parties and the taxpayers for safety and monetary reasons. But I would ask that you give us a few more weeks or month, hold it off any particular agenda, and let us have some more communication.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Quick question. I mean, I'm no expert on cell towers at all. I'm an expert on using a cell phone, I can tell you that. And I'm probably the reason you need another tower up there. I probably use it more than anybody. You were here in the discussion earlier where we talked about this ordinance where we don't allow it on the water towers. My intention would be to send it back and ask that we readdress this water tower issue. I think it makes a lot more sense than on top of Indian Rock. How feasible is that for you? Again, I don't know anything about the technology, but I would rather see them on a water tower than on Indian Rock.
So I've been a wireless consultant, specifically doing zoning for 13 years all across the United States. I've probably done about 200 water tank sites. There's special welding called capacity discharge. Gladstone, Missouri is very particular about how you mount your antennas and equipment to their water towers. It's absolutely something that Verizon would look at. I think that there may be some initial conversations, and perhaps the idea of, one or two or three polls in one location, it presents an opportunity to have multiple carriers with one hearing rather than piecemeal hearings here and there. But I couldn't say in good conscience that we don't look at water towers, because they're one of our first priorities.
Is it? Okay.
So,
Fantastic.
thank you.
Thank you.
If I could readdress the commission just real briefly. These companies work all over the country. They know how the game is played. You wear people out is what it is. And I would like to suggest, or I would like to say, kill it right now and not let it go back to the planning commission, because it's just a delay of the process, and they know how the game is played. It's a matter of just wearing people out. You can only go to so many meetings talking about the same thing. Indian Rock Park should just say no. It's a sacred place. It's a historical place, whether it's designated or not, and there's no place for those kind of antennas on top of that site.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? Okay, this issue to us presents, or at least to myself, presents a little bit of a difference, because it's not coming as a direct petition from an outside applicant. It's coming from the Parks and Recreation Department, and I know each time that we go through a quasi-judicial procedure, no matter what decision we arrive at, proper facts and finding is an important part of it. We have that capability to request an executive session at any time to go through those facts and findings in the development. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. And early on, in one of the comments was by a gentleman that cautioned that we be clear and accurate on our findings to prevent lawsuit. Now, we just heard from somebody from Verizon, which would seem to tangle Verizon in with the Parks and Rec Department and the potential liability for a future lawsuit. So we would need clear guidance in that area as well as to who the true nature of denial is going to. I'm under the impression that a denial of this is a denial towards Parks and Recreation. But we would need further instruction on that.
Commissioner, I believe that's correct. I defer to Greg. One thing to keep in mind is the decision and the process that you're involved in right now is the regulatory aspect of this. This is the same process you could have with any applicant, whether it's filed, again, whether the city's owner of the property or whether there's a private owner of the property. So the city also has another hat, which is one we haven't talked about here because it's not relevant to the regulatory aspect. That's a hat of if you would decide to approve the site in some form, then you have the legislative hat of, well, entering into an agreement, what do you want to see, what do you not want to see, some of those types of things that are within whatever you would approve here. So in this case, your role is a little bit different than it would be strictly in a regulatory role where you have a separate property owner and the private company. That being said, it gives you more flexibility because, for example, if you deny it, theoretically, if you don't do it right, I suppose it could be challenged. But why would someone challenge it if, as owner, you say, well, okay, great, we have zoning authority, we've given it to ourselves, but we're not interested contractually. That being said, I would still encourage you to go ahead and go through the process properly, and whether you like it or not like it, and put together the findings.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments amongst the commission at this point in time? Request for executive session?
Sure seems like it.
Okay.
You want to use that one?
For now, it'd be a request for executive session for quasi-judicial consideration of facts and findings on the matter, I would assume.
Just that. I wish there were a simple answer to that question. It is the combination of your ability to go into a closed session by virtue of being in this quasi-judicial function. If there are questions also that involve consultation with counsel, then we're in the attorney-client privilege-based executive session. I think, not knowing exactly the nature of the discussion, it might be best to go in on both bases at this time.
I'd agree.
Okay.
So both for a closed session for
Closed session for
quasi-judicial deliberation.
Deliberation.
And an executive session for attorney-client privilege communications.
Okay. Okay, so I move we recess into a closed session for quasi-judicial, and I move we recess into the executive session for attorney-client reasons to discuss with legal counsel matters subject privilege for reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in matters. I think for 15 minutes. That'd be sufficient?
6:15.
So come back at 6:15?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn into a closed deliberation session as part of our quasi-judicial role, as well as an executive session under attorney-client privilege. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Aye. Aye.
We are now in closed executive session.
It's time for a change at the White House. The poll of the campaign came out, and Andy Kohut, President Obama has regained the lead, but not by all that much.
All right, we're back in general session from our quasi-judicial deliberation session and executive session. Is there any further discussion, debate, motions on this issue?
I have to disagree with a few of what the folks said about flags decimating the view up there. Tomorrow is, I don't know if anyone's heard, it's an election day. But I have to say that those flags are some of the most beautiful, and what those flags stand for, the most amazing, beautiful things man's ever created. I just don't know that we want anything that man has created added to Indian Rock Park. So with that being said, I would move that we agree with the Planning Commission and deny the application based upon the following findings. The first is that the proposed flagpole height and flag size would have an adverse audio and visual impact on the park, and the proposed location and size of the fenced-in area could damage the park's naturalistic environment. Number two, the proposed flagpole height is out of scale with the existing park setting. Number three, Indian Rock Park is a historically significant area which is not a suitable location for wireless communication facilities. Then I would ask for staff to bring that back to us next week in a resolution form for approval and signing.
Second.
It'd be 2 weeks. We don't have session next week.
2 weeks.
19th.
Really, a vacation?
Yeah.
After tonight?
Veterans Day.
Maybe not. Motion and a second, based upon the certain facts and findings offered up by Commissioner Angel, that this be brought back to the commission in a resolution form for signature at our next regularly scheduled city commission meeting in support of the Planning Commission recommendation on this item. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries 5-0. And we are done with this public hearing.
Thank you. Nobody's ever clapped for us before.
We don't know what to do with that.
Thrown at us. Jeez. I'm going to cry.
I would like to thank each person that came and devoted their time to speak out and to listen to this issue, and those that have been to numerous different planning commission meetings. To that, we move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of October 22nd, 2012. Item 6.2, resolution number 126942, appointing members to the Animal Control Advisory Board, Convention and Tourism Committee, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Planning Commission. Item 6.3, authorize additional work for the repair of high service pump number 205 at the water treatment plant, project number 122937, by Douglas Pump Service Incorporated, in the amount of $11,763. Item 6.4, resolution number 12 6943, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the City of Salina and Mize Hauser and Company, certified public accountants, for the audit of city records for the year ending December 31st, 2012. Item 6.5, authorize staff to contract with Davis Concrete Construction to complete a section of sidewalk in order to establish a North Ohio bike lane in the amount not to exceed $10,300. Item 6.6, authorize the purchase of 2 snow plows from Midwest Truck Equipment in the amount of $17,354. Item 6.7, authorize the purchase of equipment and services for the interconnection of the traffic signals along the North 9th Street corridor in the amount not to exceed $82,664.
Is there any items that a commissioner wishes to be pulled from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd expect a motion.
Mayor, I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Today, we have no development business, so that moves us into administration.
Item 8.1, receive and review the 2011 audit report from Mize Hauser and Company.
Mr. Gage.
I'll be Mr. Franz this evening. I'll do my best anyway. Commissioners, I'll keep this short. You have a copy of the 2008 audit report from Mize Hauser and Company. It's a company that we have done business with for some time, and they do a great job for us. In the report, it indicates the pages to pay attention to, but generally speaking, the purpose of the audit is to basically be able to show the public our accounting and our finances. And the auditor looks at it and says, it indicates whether it's an unqualified or clean opinion or whether it's qualified. Now, while you certainly don't want your staff to be unqualified, you do want your audit to be unqualified. So we have a clean audit that meets generally accepted accounting principles, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. We do have a representative from Mize Hauser and Company who may have a word or two to say and can certainly answer questions if you have them.
Any questions of staff? Thank you. Any public comment? Any other comment to be offered? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
May I move that we receive and review the 2000 audit report from Mize Hauser and Company.
Second.
Motion and a second to receive the 2011 audit report. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.2, approve supplemental agreement number 2 for the wastewater treatment plant capital maintenance improvements, project number 102843.
Ms. Tasker?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We'll try to keep it short, but I wanted to give you a little update on what we've done on the project to date. The last major upgrade at the wastewater treatment plant was completed in 1993, and the equipment and buildings that were installed at that time are nearing 20 years, which is the typical life of a wastewater treatment facility. As you may remember, in the CIP program, we have roughly $1 million included for design of an upgrade to the wastewater treatment facility for nitrogen and phosphorus removal. And that's budgeted in 2013. And then in 2020, we've included $20 million for the upgrade for those improvements. And over the last couple of years, staff has been working to rehabilitate and replace equipment and structures that will remain in service as a part of that 2015 upgrade. We're nearing the end of our second rehabilitation project, and both projects have been completed on a estimated cost plus a fixed fee with a not-to-exceed amount, and Walters & Morgan Construction Incorporated has been the contractor completing this work. The original contract had a price tag of a little over $725,000. When we completed that project, we showed a savings of roughly $158,000. Supplemental agreement number 1 had a price tag of $270,000, and about half of that was paid through the cost savings from the first project, and then the other was from our sub-CIP budgeted items. And currently, we're wrapping up that supplemental agreement number 2. We have 4 items done, 2 remaining, and we're seeing about a $23,000, $24,000 savings on that project. And basically, these savings are seen from the fact that the contractor sometimes has to include costs that he doesn't know about, and as we do the project, we find out some of that work is not needed. So truly, we're just paying for the work that we need and not for those risks that could be assumed when you bid a project. So it's truly been a win-win situation for the city of Salina and for the contractor. This supplemental agreement number 2 has to do with work at the Headworks building, and it includes rehabilitating 2 mechanical bar screens, and they're nearly 20 years old, and installing a new screenings compactor and conveying unit. And basically, what we're proposing with this supplemental agreement number 2, that we would revise the contract price from $845,685 to $1,185,491, which is the cost of this project. And the contract time would be changed from December 31st, 2012 to December 31st, 2013. There is a possibility of another project. We have 6 roofs to be replaced out at the treatment plant, and we may bring those back as an addition to this project if they're approved in the 2013 budget. A budget allocation of $340,000 for the rehabilitation of bar screens and the new screenings compactor and conveying unit was included in the 2012 capital improvement program under the category of system enhancements. Staff offers 3 options to the City Commission, with the first being approved supplemental agreement number 2 for wastewater treatment plant maintenance improvements, project number 10-2843, from Walters Morgan Construction Incorporated, to revise a contract price to $1,185,491 and the contract time to December 1st, 2013. Option 2 is not approved supplemental agreement number 2. Option 3 is modify supplemental agreement number 2 as the City Commission sees fit. And staff recommends option 1. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have about this proposed project.
Any questions from staff?
I'm not smart enough to ask any questions.
This is a supplemental agreement to a contract we already have, but the money's budgeted already to pay for it, so we're
Yes,
not
that's
going
correct.
over.
No.
Okay.
The money, in this case, is pretty straightforward. We budgeted for this project, and now we're ready to move forward with it.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Ms. Tasker. Any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move we approve supplemental agreement number 2 for wastewater treatment plant, capital maintenance improvements, project number 10-2843 from Waters Morgan Construction Incorporated, to revise contract price to $1,185,491 and contract time to December 31st, 2013.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the supplemental agreement number 2 for project number 10-2843. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.3, first reading ordinance number 10,665, levying Salina Business Improvement District Number 1 service fees for 2013.
Mr. Cage?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As you are aware, the Business Improvement District is basically a state-enabled means of somewhat of local governance in the district for a city, enabled by a city. And we have one Business Improvement District. It's in the downtown. They've been in place for some time, and they have a lot of responsibilities, but one of those is to create a budget for their activities and also to recommend to you their fees for the upcoming year. In this particular case, for their service fees, they're recommending a 3% increase, I think partially based on their direction from the commissioners, so as to not create rate shock every so many years, and also to meet their needs. So that is what they've done. You have attached the ordinance that establishes the rates. In each of the different districts, the rates would go up to 3%. That's the only difference that you have here. So with that, staff's recommending approval of the ordinance, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions of staff? Thank you. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 12-10665 on first reading.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 12-10665. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0.
Item 8.4, approval of the 2013 Vehicles and Equipment Sub-CIP.
Mr. Franz?
Got a
lot of hats on today, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not doing a too good job of imitating Rod, but I'll do my best again. We have for you the 2013 Vehicle and Equipment Sub-CIP. As you are aware, each year we work within a 5-year capital improvement plan, and then we hone in on the upcoming year. That plan is divided by sub-functional areas. We call them sub-CIPs, and in this case, we're focusing on vehicles and equipment, primarily because, especially with the timing for ordering vehicles, we need to do that very early. So we've always tried to run that aspect of the plan as early as possible, and that's why we have that in front of you. We have the attached sheet, shows the detailed list of projects. We have both a spreadsheet that just shows the number, shows which fund it's budgeted from, and just a brief description of the project, also the department, and then we have a couple sheets that provide you with a little bit of background for each item that's included. If the plan is approved, then the next step for the staff would be to develop the detailed specifications and to move forward with the purchases. Any purchase items that add up to $10,000 or more come back to you for approval, so this isn't the first time that you'll see this. You'll actually see it on the actual purchases. The action today is simply to approve the plan, and typically what happens is this is the first phase for vehicles and equipment. It'll come back in another phase or two to clean up the other items. And in that case, that's pretty relevant here because in the general fund, we've included a couple items that take your total a little above the budget amount of $500,000 to $534,800. The plan with that is to see if we have savings in the first phase, and then if so, we would request at the later date that might be reapplied or reallocated for that. Generally, we do see some savings because our estimates are a little bit high, and that works out to our advantage, so we've set that up this way so we could consider those items. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Certainly, if the commission concurs with the recommendation, we'd recommend approval.
Any questions of staff? Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I move we approve the 2013 Vehicles and Equipment Sub-CIP.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the 2013 Vehicles and Equipment Sub-CIP. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carried 5-0. In item 8.5, we have a published request for executive session.
I move we recess into executive session for 65 minutes to discuss the legal counsel matters subject to attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in those matters, and reconvene at 7:35, and also move into recess to discuss personnel issues pertaining to non-elected city personnel for the reason that public discussion of the matter would violate the privacy rights of the non-elected personnel involved, and to recess also for trade secrets to discuss confidential data relating to financial affairs of a corporation for the reason that public discussion of the information would competitively disadvantage the corporation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move into executive session in summary for attorney-client privilege, for personnel, and for trade secrets for a total of 65 minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? We are now in executive session. Do we expect any action?
No, we do not.
Want to reuse that?